Hello, BookTube. The stars aligned favorably today. 3 stars in particular. Star number one was that I had a very nice little checky poo of totally disposable money, not earmarked for anything. Star number two was that I had the company of a group of muscular teenagers, which meant that I didn't have to worry about how heavy anything was during the course of the day. Lugging was no longer an issue. And star number three was that one of those teenagers had access to a car, so we could go far afield on adventures. I guess you'd have to say there's a fourth star. Star number four would be the fact that my one remaining dog, my beautiful Malin Moore, is she's not prone to crisis. She doesn't get into boneheaded mishaps that need correcting. She doesn't do anything like that. I put her up on a couch or a bed, and she just goes to sleep until I come back. So there's not that stretched elastic band pulling me back the way it was with my fat little basset hound, who was so stupid that and so physically incapable that she could easily get into some sort of day-ruining crisis if she wasn't watched constantly. You had to watch her constantly because she was a little dense. All those stars aligned today, and so I had adventures, which is very nice. And a large chunk of that was strange bookstores, far afield, strange new venues in the far-flung corners of Timbuktu. And I didn't have to have any kind of restraint when I was at these places because we had a car and I had ample spending money. And I didn't have to carry anything. So I exercised very little in the way of restraint. And when I got back here, now that the afternoon is starting to settle down, I'm starting to sort of look towards a whole evening of writing, which it's calling to me already. But now that it's sort of settled down, I've sort of sorted out what I got. I got a mountain of books. We also had a mountain of fun. It wasn't just that I was dragging poor teenagers to bookstores where they didn't want to be. We did all sorts of other stuff too, and it was fun. We had a great time. But I've sorted the books, and it turns out when I got back and looked at them all, that probably half of what I got today is stuff that I can't show you because it's destined for some of you. So I don't want to spoil the surprise. So I'm not going to show you those, but I do want to take you quickly through a mind-bogglingly boring tour of the ones that I can show you. Starting with this, a Penguin classic, which is Project Penguin is, as far as I'm concerned, as active as ever. The original Project Penguin was to fill that whole back wall. So the whole wall was Penguin Classics. That's great. That actually happened. But I wouldn't mind filling more bookcases in this room with Penguin Classics. Absolutely. I love them more than anything else. I go back to these books as often as most of the rereading that I do is classics. And 9 times out of 10, my first instinct is going to be to see if I can find a Penguin Classic and reread that. And I found one that I didn't have in trade paperback. I'm phasing out my mass market Penguins in favor of trade paperbacks, and I found one, The Moonstone by Wilkie Collins. Look at that. And inside it was a bookmark that says "Reading is for everyone." And I don't know if you can see, it also has the Braille for "Reading is for everyone," which I thought was really neat. So another Penguin to add to the list, and then a work of sort of quasi-urban fantasy that I remember reading and liking when it first came out, probably a decade ago. And I think it was right before I got back into book reviewing, so I didn't have any professional reason to keep it or to assess it. It disappeared the short story is it disappeared a long time ago. And it's Alive in Necropolis by Doug Dorst. Isn't that a fantastic cover? It's Colma, California is the only incorporated city in America where the dead outnumber the living. A cemetery city serving San Francisco, Colma is the resting place for the likes of Joe DiMaggio, Wyatt Earp, and William Randolph Hearst. It is also the home of Michael Mercer, a rookie cop trying to go by the book as he struggles to navigate a new realm of grown-up relationships. But instead of settling comfortably into adult life, Mercer becomes obsessed with the mysterious fate of his predecessor in the Coleman PD, who seems to have spent his last years policing the dead as well as the living. As Mercer dives deeper into that's his predecessor, Featherstone's story, his own sanity starts to slip too. Either that, or Colma's more famous residents are not resting in peace as they should. And I liked it a lot, and I've thought about it since, and thought, especially when I've encountered this artist. This is who did the art for this cover? I should probably say, because when I find this artist's work now, I've always noticed it, and I've always remembered Tomer Hanukkah, who's actually an artist who I have praised before on this channel for his New Yorker covers, which are just sublime. They're just beautiful. And this came out in 2008, so it was right at the beginning of Open Letters Monthly, the literary journal that John Cotter and Sam Sachs and I started. Right around then, and so I was in the infancy of requesting books. I was in the infancy of having a professional interest in these things. I wasn't even sure at that point. I think Open Letters was a year old, and my intergalactically famous book blog, Steve Reads, was, I think, a year and a half old at that point. I wasn't even really sure that I would come all the way back into the world of books, into that side of the world of books. I was a bookseller for a quarter of a century. So I was very happy to find this, especially since it, like most of these books, was virtually free. And then the next one is a placeholder book. It's Deborah Kramer's Great Waters, and it's a really lovely meditation on oceans, all their moods, all their natural history. It's full of original illustrations, and the reason it's a placeholder book is because I do want to reread it and I do want to own it, but this was the worst shape of any book I got today. And it's a placeholder because it reminds me that the next time I see this at the Brattle, this was like 10 cents. So I didn't mind getting it even as a placeholder. And if I want to reread it right away, I can. But the placeholder aspect is that if I want to wait until I see it in better shape, either a better shape trade paperback or preferably the hardcover, which, if I remember correctly, didn't quite look like this. But it's a perfect example of my age-old dictum, the Brattle will provide. This will show up at the Brattle in hardcover, and when it does, I'll have a reminder to... then the next one's a joy, and it's also a weird thing, a weird, idiosyncratic find that you really... It's one of the signal joys of a secondhand used bookstore is that you're going to find stuff like this that you're not going to think to look for it on any place like Abe or A Libris, and it's the Cape Cod Story of Thornton Burgess, by R.A. Lovell, and it's the life story really of Thornton Burgess, who did 150 kids books. He did a ton of Peter Rabbit stories. He did a ton of other things. He did a beautiful, wonderful book called Thornton's Nature Book for Children. And he did another one of those about birds as well. And those are worth finding. In fact, this book reminded me that I had the Burgess Book of Animals forever, and don't at the moment have a copy. And next time I see a good condition hardcover at the Brattle, I'm definitely going to get it. But he was an institution. He wrote bedtime stories and animal stories and nature stories for the whole of his career. He was born in 1874, and he was born in Sandwich, Massachusetts, which is at the very beginning of Cape Cod, a town that I absolutely love. I love Sandwich, Massachusetts, and he moved away, but he always had a soft spot for Sandwich. And this is primarily concerned with the Sandwich world of Thornton Burgess and his family, who go back in Sandwich forever and ever. And it was Lovell originally started thinking about this and organizing the material and talking to people who had old photos and old documents in the very early 1970s, because he was gearing up for the 1974 centennial of Thornton Burgess, which was the brainchild of Ralph and Nancy Titcomb, who at the time had Titcomb's Bookshop, which is it's in East Sandwich, and it's a wonderful, fantastic Cape Cod bookstore. Really a destination. If you go to Cape Cod on vacation, you have to go to Titcomb's. It's still there, of course, still a very thriving used bookstore and also independent bookstore, and it's the way a bookstore should be done. It really is, just in general. And I was so happy to find this because it has all sorts of black and white photos and all sorts of old Cape Cod history of a type that, it wasn't the main goal. The main goal of this book was to tell Thornton Burgess' story, but it does it anyway. And who knows how I would have, the only place in the world that I would be like to find this, other than at totally random at a Timbuktu bookstore, would be shops on the Cape. I'm sure that Titcomb's has copies of this, or has regularly had them. And then he's got a stack of big, heavy books. The boys were not happy, but as I told them when they were loading them, this is where your delts come from. It's actually not true. Their delts come from targeted workouts, personal bests, and ample supplies of creatine as a pre-workout. But I won't tell them if you don't. The first one is this thing. I see it all the time in used bookstores and at the Brattle, but I don't actually at the moment have a copy, and I want to reread it for a couple of reasons for upcoming books. It's this, The Price of Power by Seymour Hersh, all about Henry Kissinger in the Nixon White House, and it's just fantastic. This is the peak of Hersh's enormous talent as a writer. And one of the things I love about it is that sometimes some of the pages have enormous, densely microtyped footnotes to just double the length of the narrative. This is such a good book to read on the subject. I mean, you have to be interested in American history, you have to be interested in American politics, and you have to be interested in the self-destruction of the Nixon White House. If you are, you have to read this. It's an absolutely required text. And Seymour Hersh knew it at the time. He knew at the time he was working on something enormous and absolutely definitive. And when it came out, I mean, look at the cover of this. I think this is a UK paperback. The cover has blurb after blurb after blurb, and so does the back. It's got, everybody loved it. Everybody thought it was serious when it came out. The next one, a gigantic biography of a dead white guy. This is James Boswell, the famous biographer of Samuel Johnson, and this is the later years, which is 1769 to 1795, and it's by Frank Brady. And it's as the 2-volume James Boswell biography. It's noteworthy because volume number 1 had a different person's name on the title. The volume number 1 was Frederick Pottle, who was the Boswellian researcher and writer. And the two of them collaborated on the first volume, and then they collaborated a lot on the second volume. But it was more of Frank Brady's baby, so his name is on the book. And this is the better volume of the two. I mean, the 2 volumes, I don't have volume 1 by Pottle. I really should, but I will find it, I'm sure. But this is the volume that covers the years of Boswell's apotheosis. This was when he was famous, and when he was knowing everybody, he was going everywhere, he was spending as much time as he could with Johnson, already had an eye on writing the definitive book about Johnson, and there was a lot of competition to write that book. Everybody knew that there would be a jockeying to be the person who writes the Johnson biography, and Boswell very much wanted it to be him. Of course, these are also the years when he was positively gooey with venereal diseases. Sort of a baker's dozen of them. It's amazing that a guy could get out of bed in the morning. And in his journals and letters, he's completely frank about that. It's just mind-boggling to read. But I loved the first volume, and I loved this. I read this when did this come out? Good Lord. I probably read it when it first came out. 1984, yeah. And I was happy to find it again, almost for nothing. The next one, another one that fills a gap. That I'm hoping that as I fill these gaps, they will stay filled. I might have mentioned on this channel before, Rick Atkinson. He did a trilogy about the U.S. Army in World War II, and this is the day of battle. This is the Sicily campaign, and it's called the Liberation Trilogy. And what it really shows starting with North Africa, going to Sicily, and then Europe. What it really shows is an institution learning how to protect itself and how to survive and grow. It really is an amazing. I mean, by the third volume, the U.S. Army knows what it's doing and has a mind-boggling amount of materiel and personnel. So it's become a world force by then. And so the third volume isn't so much a learning curve as it is just a straightforward narration of the Western Front. But the first two volumes are the first two volumes stick much more closely to the idea of an army learning how to do its job without getting annihilated on the field. I love the third volume, absolutely love it. I think he's a fantastic writer. And recently I found the first one, An Army at Dawn, and I remember at the time thinking, sooner or later I will find a copy of The Day of Battle, and there it is. So I now have the Liberation trilogy complete. The next one is another hardcover, another duplicate. It's Wolf Hall. It was 10 cents, so I had to grab it. It was 10 cents, and I had a car, and I didn't have to carry it myself. Who of us wouldn't lose control under such circumstances? So I grabbed it because I think at the moment all I have is a paperback. As fast as I get these things, I get rid of them. I send them out to other people. And then the last one, this is it for now, I promise. This is an extra tedious book haul. The last one is The Kennedy Half Century by Larry Sabato, and this falls squarely in the Open Letters time frame. When was this? 2013. And yet I didn't get it. I didn't request it from the publisher, and I didn't read it until months later. And that's something I really need to work on. Big, gigantic tomes, new studies of the JFK years. I have been noticing in the last 5 or 6 years a distinct reluctance on my part to dig right into them, and I've got to uproot that and get rid of it, because I'm very happy to have found this this thing. I'm very happy to add it to my history shelf, and it covers the administration, it covers the assassination in a fairly large chunk, and it covers the legacy. So it's a great Kennedy volume to have. I'm glad I finally got around to having it. So there you go. We'll try a book pile here. This is a fairly big one. This is The Kennedy Half Century, a perfect edition. Then Wolf Hall, I admit, an extraneous buy, but again, I was paying almost nothing for it. I wasn't carrying it, and I wasn't transporting it. So it was like whistling for it here. If you could whistle for this thing, I bet you'd have got it too. Then The Day of Battle by Rick Atkinson. Then James Boswell, The Later Years. Then The Price of Power by Seymour Hersh. Then The Cape Cod Story of Thornton Burgess. How wonderful. All of his old relatives from the dawn of the 19th century. Then Great Waters, but a kind of an ratty paperback, so I will be on the lookout for a replacement volume. Then Alive in Necropolis, which I'm actually looking forward to rereading right away. And last, a Penguin classic of The Moonstone. So it's multicolored anyway. As extravagant as that seems, keep in mind that's only half of what I got. The rest of it is all going in the mail. I would show you that too. You'd never get free of this video. But as it is, I'll sign off for now, and I'll see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.